I'm Devin Kroner. I am a pastor as well as a real estate agent, a lover of history and politics and really world events in general. I also really enjoy getting to know and talk to various kinds of people. It doesn't matter what political persuasion people have, whether they're into myths and fantasies, old wives' tales, or the oral traditions of history. Each and every person has a perspective that is unique and valuable and adds something to the story of our lives. And what I am endeavoring to do in this series is to take the time to chat with various people, people from backgrounds that I know and understand, people from backgrounds that I have nothing in common with, and basically ask the question, what do you believe? These sessions are not about argument. It's not about debate. It's not them trying to persuade me or me trying to persuade them. I will, through this series, talk with people that I know beyond a shadow of a doubt. I disagree with what they think. That's not the point. The point is, I want to hear what they think. I want you to be able to hear what they think. And maybe you learn something. Maybe your interest is piqued. Maybe you become curious to find out more for yourself. That is what Do You Believe is all about. And so this session is session 1. And I am happy to start this session off with a special guest joining me by the name of Charlie Powell. He is a friend, but he's also someone who has a great deal of education, a bachelor's degree as well as a master's degree. He has extensive understanding of politics and history. And Charlie, I am glad to have you here with me tonight. Thanks so much for joining me for the very first session of What Do You Believe?
Yes, I can hear you, Devin.
There you go. Technology is always wonderful when it works. Well,
Yeah.
Charlie, I just kind of opened up this session explaining that this is the very first in a series of discussions that I want to have with various people. And I know you and I actually plan to have a couple of different discussions. But first of all, take a moment, if you would, and just introduce yourself so that everybody understands who you are.
Okay. Well, my name is Charlie Powell. I am a member of your church, Family Worship Center in Wilder, Kentucky. I've been going there for quite a while now, about 4 or 5 years now, with my wife Brittany. That is our home church, is where we go. And you and me, we've talked a lot about certain different topics, wide variety of topics. Let's terms of spirituality, sports, weird stuff going on, politics, whatever. And yeah, that's all I can really think of in terms of introducing myself. And I look forward to these our discussions about these topics.
Absolutely. One of them I want to throw out there for us is the subject of hockey, because again, you kind of explained that to me for the very first time, and there's still a lot that I don't understand about it, but that's for another another night. Tonight's topic, in this very first episode of this series that I hope will be kind of an ongoing series with various folks from around the country, is going to be about the Loch Ness Monster. Right? And so I want to give just a couple of brief historical background points for people, because again, this series is it's not political, it's not spiritual, it's not mythological. It's all of those things and more. There will be people that I'll interview where we'll talk about finances and planning. There will be people that I'll talk to who are going to talk about being pro-vaccine or anti-vaccine. There will be people that will talk about homeopathic medicine versus more progressive researched medicine. All those things are part of what this series is going to be about. And so tonight we're starting off because, again, you and I know each other, as you've said, and we're going to talk about Loch Ness and the Loch Ness Monster. But first of all, for people that maybe don't know a whole lot beyond just the Loch Ness Monster is out there, Loch Ness is actually a lake in the Scottish Highlands.
Yes.
It's the largest fresh body of water in Great Britain proper. And a lot of people believe that there is this creature that lives in the loch, and there are accounts going back as far as 1,500 years ago of people claiming to have seen this creature and
Mhm.
various stories that have gone along with it. Now, some of those, as recently as the 1930s, were discredited
Yes.
as things that were people set it up, that was a hoax.
Mhm.
But there are definitely stories and accounts of people that seem to be credible, seem to have experienced encountering some sort of creature. And so lots of different projects have been undertaken over the years to
Mhm.
try and find this creature, prove its existence, figure out what it was. As recently as the 60s, they employed sonar technology.
Mhm.
And they discovered at that time, using sonar, that there was something that they couldn't explain that was down there at the bottom of the lake, but they couldn't figure out what it was. Then in the 70s, a new research team, and these are from universities there in Britain,
Right.
came back using sonar as well as deep water cameras, and they not only discovered something, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a screen here of this is the picture from the 1975 expedition, the sonar image, not that one, the other one. But this is a picture too. This is the camera enhanced camera picture. So this, it was taken in black and white,
Okay.
okay, and then digitally enhanced with the computer from the lab.
Mhm.
And then this one is the sonar one. Hopefully that'll come up. Why is that not coming up? It's coming up the same one. Let
Hmm.
me, here we go. Let me try it now and see what it does. But because I want people to see that, yes, this is considered by a lot of people to be a myth. And I'm going to let you talk about this more. But
Mhm.
again, there is evidence to the effect that something is, or has been at least, out there. There's the sonar image from the 1975 expedition. And then the camera image was the one that I showed just a moment ago. So, Charlie, first of all, since the program, if you want to call it that, is called "What Do You Believe?" Tell
Mhm.
us, what do you believe, why, and then we'll go from there.
Well, in terms of believing if the Loch Ness monster is real or not, I believe that there is a creature that could have been at one time, or if now, currently still, uh, in Loch Ness. Now, as to say, if it's the plesiosaur um, dinosaur creature that everybody is like, I would say um, most accounts are based on, or saying that's the creature that's in there.
Mhm.
Um, I would say my first my first inclinations of believing it, I would have gone there. Yes. I believe there it could have been a dinosaur because I mean we I mean I'll go later into this as we continue our discussion tonight, but I believe that there are possible descendants of dinosaurs that still live among us, including alligators and crocodiles. They are appeared to be of the dinosaur line. I wouldn't say they're exact dinosaurs, but they are part of the line of reptiles. Um, but I mean, in to put it in a nutshell, yes, I believe there is something down there. What I don't know exactly.
Mhm.
Um, Plesiosaur, probably not anymore because there is so much sonar mapping of the Loch Ness that they've even looked into some of the underwater caverns, and it's just some of them are too small and some of them are big, but they're not big to where a plesiosaur could possibly grow to its biggest size
Mhm.
as it could have done probably during the dinosaur periods.
Right.
Um, so, what is down there? Don't know.
Mhm.
But I don't think it's a plesiosaur.
Mhm. So now you mentioned obviously different kinds of creatures that exist today that would be considered prehistoric.
Yes.
And again, we understand sharks have been around.
Mhm.
If you take the evolutionary timeline, if you take the long Earth timeline, because again, there are a lot of different people that are going to be watching this,
Yeah.
and some people believe that the Earth is only a few thousand years old, and I hope
Right.
to talk to somebody about that at some point. But let's take that more scientific timeline view and
Okay.
say billions and billions of years are involved. Then we know from what science tells us sharks have been around for millions and millions of years. Alligators and crocodiles, as you've mentioned, different kinds of reptiles. But what do you think in terms of the Loch Ness monster, uh, the creature Nessie, as it's affectionately called by a lot of people?
Mhm.
What do you think it maybe could be, and why, based on what you've read or experienced or talked to other people about?
Well, I mean, going back to the whole plesiosaur thing, when that original picture surfaced, the black and white, where you see like a long neck and a small snout or whatever coming out of the water, and everybody's like, "Oh, it's a monster! It's a monster! What could it possibly be?" And then that was eventually discredited. It was a submarine or a buoy or something like that that um, a journalist tried to get back after the back at his newspaper for discrediting him for other accounts of discreditation, and it just came out to be true. It's like, yeah, we can't believe a word this guy says. He just tried to say there was a dinosaur living in Loch Ness. Um, but what could possibly as of right now, most people think that there are just giant eels that live in Loch Ness. It's the only um it's the only kind of fish that is living in the loch or big enough that lives in the loch.
Mhm.
They tried to figure out if it was like sturgeon catfish, and those can grow to a big size. Um, but there's been no evidence of sturgeon. There's been no evidence of trying to think of the other name of fish. Oh, I can picture it in my head. I just can't
Mhm.
figure out the name of it. But they tried to figure out, like, is it a giant fish? Is it a giant lizard? Are we talking like a dinosaur?
Mhm.
Um, but uh, giant eels would. I mean, if the eels are the only like carnivore, like that can eat smaller fish or prey or whatever that live in it,
Mhm.
you could say that there's nothing to where an eel in that lock could eat it. Nothing could eat the eel
Mhm.
unless man catches the eel. So therefore, I'm kind of like it could be that, but it could also be there's a migration issue as
Mhm.
well for.
What about the purported size? Because again, even if you throw out the ones that you know are discredited accounts,
Mhm.
they're still the ones that are more considered historically credible still describe a creature that is very, very large.
Yes.
And I mean, eels. I mean, I've seen some big eels
Mhm.
at the aquarium. I've seen some pictures of big eels, but nothing that would kind of explain something on this magnitude.
Right. Um, well, I always say that our Earth's oceans, our waters, they are the final frontier, in my opinion. I don't think space needs to be explored as much. Now, I feel like we know so little about what lives in the water that there's constant new discoveries of fish or sea creatures that are being discovered because they live so far down. But just because they live that far down doesn't mean that they can't come up or they can't swim or go to like Loch Ness. So part of me is kind of thinking, well, what could possibly be in our water that we don't know about that
Mhm.
could be described as a sea creature or monster?
Mhm.
And that so I mean, I think there are so many possibilities out there, but in terms of like the size and like how everybody says, "Oh, it's huge," and I mean, take your pick. I mean,
You'd be
it's their
relative,
word against ours, pretty much.
right? And huge could be relative too. I mean, if you are not expecting anything and
Yeah.
you see something appear in the water,
Mhm,
it could seem a lot bigger, if you're startled or unprepared for it,
mhm.
even than it might actually be, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, Loch Ness, it is a lake, and I mentioned at the top of this that it's the largest fresh body of water in Great Britain, but it still is 23 miles long
Mhm.
and over 800 feet deep at its deepest part. So it's not a small lake. It's not like
No,
a swimming pool out there.
and
But
and when I was looking at maps of Loch Ness, I was trying to figure out if like the migration thing could have came up as well,
mhm.
where something could have swim into Loch Ness, and it
Coming
looked,
up the river.
yeah, yeah, there is a river that feeds into
Mhm.
Loch Ness, and that eventually leads out to I think the North Sea, at the top of Scotland.
Mhm.
So like I said, anything can swim in and out, and
Mhm.
it just depends on, I guess, whatever the conditions are for something
Mhm.
to surface.
What do you think is it about the story of the Loch Ness monster and the mythology here that so fascinates people? Like what, especially since nobody has found this creature. Why
Right.
do you think people are so fascinated by this and continuing to try and even do scholarly research to discover what it could be when on a surface level there seems to be very shaky evidence?
Hmm. Well, I think there's it's one of those, if you can prove it to be real, it'll be one for the history books. People will remember your name. People will be like, "See, we knew it the whole time," or whatever. It's not just a myth. We got evidence. We got something. But exactly what do you have? That's a whole different theory. That's a whole different. What is it exactly? The plesiosaur theory, or is it a different
Mhm.
creature theory? But I think what draws so much attention to Loch Ness and trying to find if there is something living in there is because you have so many accounts of something popping up
Mhm.
from the 1930s to before. In the, I think I was doing some reading, and it sounded like there was some accounts from the early 1800s, 1700s,
Mhm.
and then there's also a saint of the Catholic Church who apparently saw it in 500 AD or
Mhm.
something, or saw a creature in 500 AD. And
Right.
so I guess you're taking that saint of the
Mhm.
Catholic Church, you're taking his word, and then you're just building on top of that. And the more and more people who say they've seen something, it's like, well, if it's more than one person,
Mhm.
maybe there is something there.
Right. Well, and again, the earliest rendition of this creature comes from the early 500s, from the research that I was able to do, and it's a stone carving there at the lake at Loch Ness that
Mhm.
is a creature that resembles a plesiosaur with the flippers and things like that. Uh,
Mhm.
But then in about 540, 546, somewhere around then, is when the saint you're referring to, and I did not write down his name,
I can't remember his name
but
either.
I was reading this story a little bit ago that he was coming through. He was the one who brought Christianity to the Scottish area,
Mhm.
and he heard about this creature that was attacking people at the lake. And the story goes that he went and confronted the beast and commanded it in the name of Jesus to return and leave people alone. And from then on, nobody was ever attacked by this creature. But
Hmm.
what he described was this giant creature as well, that just this massive creature that had a longer neck, had these flippers. And so, even if that's not what it would be today, it seems like there was obviously something there at some point, right?
Yeah. Right. Like, and that goes back to what I was saying earlier. There could have been something like that there at one time. Is it
Mhm.
still there? Probably not. And if it isn't there anymore, you got to ask, well, where could it have gone? It could have gone up the river, could have gone into the sea. But at
Mhm.
the same time, how does it survive in open water? What are predators to it that could possibly to where this creature no longer exists?
Sure, sure.
And that's another, and that just goes on to the whole theory of, I mean, I think if the accounts were true back then that there's something like that could have existed, it probably doesn't exist there anymore
Mhm.
because of the ecosystem.
Right. Well, and also, even the idea of a plesiosaur during the 500s,
Mhm,
right? What we know from history and world geography even is that there was an ice age.
mhm,
And that last ice age, again, we're taking the evolutionary timeline, the long Earth timeline here.
right.
But that ice age ended about 10,000 years ago. And
Mhm,
during that ice age, Loch Ness would have been frozen.
mhm,
So the idea that this creature was always there, a plesiosaur every indication scientists believe was a cold-blooded animal. So there's
mhm,
no way it could have survived through that ice age. So even if that's what it was, it
mhm.
had to have been a transplant. And so your question of where did it go and what happened? I mean, what thoughts do you have about that? If that's what it was or whatever it was, what do you think could have happened to it at this point?
I I think it no longer exists. I don't believe this plesiosaur to exist anymore.
Mhm.
Um, be because if it was the largest animal in that loch, it had to have a food source. But if the food source is only eel now, that's the major population of fish in the loch now is eel. But I mean, if the food source travels upriver and goes into the open ocean, it has to follow its food source. And if it doesn't, then it dies in the loch, and you would have a skeleton of some sorts in the loch.
Mhm.
But if you don't have that, then you have to say, well, maybe it went up the river, it went into open ocean, and then whatever it finds in open ocean, it could be bigger and have way more teeth and could travel in a pack or in some sort of pool of fish to where it just doesn't stand a chance by itself.
Mhm. So, do you believe that there is still something there, some sort of creature at this point at all, or do you think that it's just the eels?
I wouldn't rule anything out
Mhm.
to I mean, if there's a waterway into and out of the loch, anything could get in, anything can be described as a monster by anybody who hasn't seen anything they've never seen before.
Sure.
So, I mean, most research has said that there are eels in the loch.
Mhm.
Monster size eels? Don't know. Um, but the term monster is relative. It depends on how big you're talking.
Mhm.
Are we talking a 5-foot eel? Are we talking a 10-foot eel? Are we talking about an eel that just is the king of all eels? I don't know.
Mhm.
But um like I said, our water is so our Earth's oceans are so mysterious that I think there is so much down there that would probably give even us adults nightmares.
Absolutely. Yeah, my family has a hotel in Florida, and when I was a kid, I used to love to swim out to the sandbar with my cousins, and we
Mhm.
would jump off the sandbar and dive for sand dollars. And then I watched Jaws at 13 years old.
Oh.
Right? And, I had never before considered that there was ever anything in those waters that could
Mhm.
hurt me. And now, I haven't gone in several years, but now I swim in the pool across the street, and everybody else swims in the ocean
Yeah.
because you can't see in those
Yeah.
waters, and I ain't letting it get me. So what originally drew you to this idea, the study of the Loch Ness monster, the mythology of the Loch Ness monster? I mean, because again, you picked this topic. What is it about this that was so fascinating and intriguing to you?
Well, I think that I I thought about this before even coming on. I thought this is so interesting of me to say that I believed in a Loch Ness monster or believed in a plesiosaur dinosaur when my own brother, he is a dinosaur fanatic. He is a Jurassic Park fanatic. He loves the movies. I mean, he's all about scientific DNA testing and trying to like bring possible extinct creatures back by cloning or something like that. So I find it so interesting that I'm the one fascinated by this. He's not. He believes in Bigfoot. I don't. I don't believe in Bigfoot. I believe in the Loch Ness monster, but I don't believe in Bigfoot. So I find it this is so weird how he's the dinosaur guy and he discredits the Loch Ness monster, and I'm the guy who's like, "Oh, come on, something had to have lived there." But
Mhm.
Bigfoot? What are you nuts? Um,
But now
so
you kind of take more of the opinion that something was there, but isn't necessarily there any longer.
It right. It's either it's not there anymore or it now has or there is some sort of migration, um, to where some sort of species has, um, adopted
Mm.
to come into the loch at a maybe at a certain point in time of the year and then swims back out. But, I mean,
Do you think there will ever be a way to get a definitive answer at this point?
realistically, like through our own understanding or as much research as possible, no. I don't think there will be a clear cut answer because I mean strange things happen.
Mm.
There will be strange incidents. There will be strange happenings. Um, take the world that we live in right now. I mean, with quarantine and coronavirus. I mean, you never thought in a million years you'd be stuck at home and say that's a bad thing. Um, but um, I don't think so. I This is the way I've always looked at it is if and when you get to heaven, one of my first main questions will be, "Okay, you gotta tell me, how did the dinosaurs happen?" I mean, that'll be me and my brother's top 5 questions, like, "Okay, describe it in chronological order for us. How did the dinosaurs happen?"
Mhm.
And that so
It is fascinating to think about because, again, there's so much science there, so much archaeology, so much in the geological record, the fossils, all those sorts of things that
Mhm,
indicate that something definitely was around.
mhm.
But again, there's so many questions and so many things that we don't have answers to. Why, in your opinion, which is kind of off topic of Loch Ness now, but why do you think that it could be that, as a person of faith, uh, God would do that, leave so many things unanswered?
I think to make it fun for us. I think I think to make it fun. I mean, to where it's like, okay. either he's trying to tell us something or this is just one big game to him, and he just loves watching us, like, trying to figure it out, and he's like, "Ooh, they're getting pretty close. Are they getting close? Are they getting close to understanding me?" And so, I mean, that's one of the things that intrigues a lot of people about, like, these sort of things is and
Mhm.
about, like, dinosaurs and other weird things is like, okay, does this prove that dinosaurs came before man? Dinosaurs were around when God created them? Like, did God I mean, was it an accident? What are we talking about here? Divine
Mhm.
intervention? What are we talking? And that so I think there's a level of this being fun
Mhm.
and that to try and figure out. It's a mystery. Everybody loves a good mystery. And I think for us it's trying to figure it out.
Mhm.
We just want to figure it out, and if we can't figure it out while we're here on Earth, we'll eventually get to the big man and go, "Okay, I spent 50 something years of my life trying to figure this stuff out. You tell me right now, was I even this close?"
It does keep it exciting, and especially when you look at all of the mythology surrounding the Loch Ness monster,
Mhm,
all of the stories. I mean, from people again just driving down the road saying they saw something
mhm.
to the stone carving that's there that's 1,500 years old, to
Vikings
the
believing in
story of the saint coming through. I mean, there's
it.
so many things that are like little nuggets to follow,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, little breadcrumbs. I mean, you even have to think about not just like, uh Catholicism in terms of a saint of the Catholic faith saying that this creature exists, but you have to look at it from other perspectives too, to where even in Norse mythology, they thought these giant serpents
Mhm.
existed as well, and they even carved them into their ships.
Sure.
So it was sort of seen as well. The monsters won't hurt us if we carve a likeness in our ship,
Mhm.
and that so
Almost like deifying them.
yeah, almost deifying, worshiping it, saying, "Okay, it won't harm us if we act like we're part of it."
Mhm. Do you think part of the fascination with the idea of this unknown creature is also a way for some people to maybe just explain things that are scary? You talked about any creature earlier. You said any creature can be considered a monster when you don't know what it is.
Mhm.
Um, do you think that that might play into the mythology of the Loch Ness monster to some degree? That because people just don't know, they kind of make up the other stuff as they go along.
Yeah, I would say there's an element to that. I mean, you if you don't know, you if you don't know something, you can make it up. I
Mhm.
mean, you can always make up something, and if somebody says, "Well, where's your proof?" or "That's a lie," or that how would you how can you prove that? Well, then it comes right back in their face. Well, how can you disprove it?
Right.
So there is, I think there's an element of making stuff up as you go as
Mhm.
well.
What about the idea to be a little bit more cynical, the idea of control and using, the carving, using the stories as a way to maybe keep the local population a lot more so early on, 1,500, 1,000 years ago than now, but to keep people under control, maybe because that was the fresh water source. Do you think that could be an element that could have played into this whole mythology at some point?
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's a lot that could go into this. Uh, to a human perspective, a supernatural perspective, a natural perspective, whatever. But I mean, in terms of like population control or something like that, to where you want to frighten the locals to, hey, don't go down by the lock unless you're actually going there for a real purpose, not just to like it could have been a story to where you tell the kids don't go down to the lock or something like that. I mean, you have those stories all the time where adults are trying to tell their kids, hey, don't do that, because if you do that, this will happen. And then those stories become larger than life, to where even the kids will tell them to their kids when they
Right.
grow up.
And they lose the reality of it because nobody really knows where it came from.
Right. So
Mhm.
that's where the myth, that's where the story becomes more myth and legend, because more and more people do not want to figure out if it's true or not. They just keep telling the story because, hey, I was a kid. My dad told me not to go down the lock. Now I'm your dad, so I'm telling you not to go down to the lock. And
Mhm.
so it'll just keep going and going until eventually somebody will say, well, hmm, I wonder if that's true or not. And that's when you finally get to the whole, let's try and prove this thing. Let's try
Mhm.
and get some sonar mapping. Let's start actually exploring the lock and see what's actually living in there.
Mhm. Awesome. Well, in the last couple of minutes that we have here, any final thoughts or anything else you wanted to say on this topic that you wanted to make sure to share?
Um, yeah, I'll just for clarification, for anybody who may be listening or watching, um, was it the I I would say that I did support the theory of a plesiosaur as a kid.
Mhm.
Now with all this information coming out, all these studies by universities in Great Britain to study the lock, to understand the ecosystem, to understand what's down there. The more and more that stuff has come out, the more and more it's like, yeah, I can't say that as a 30-year-old and be like, yeah, there's a plesiosaur that still lives in there, and go, well, the food source comes to it, or the ecosystem evolves for it. Those do not prove a theory that this plesiosaur exists, because it's not natural in that sense.
Mhm.
So, as a kid, yes, I believed in the Loch Ness monster as being a plesiosaur. Now, with more and more science behind it, I don't believe it is a plesiosaur, but I would believe that, like I said, I've said this twice, I think, during this time together, that our oceans hold a lot of secrets. Something down there could be considered the next Loch Ness monster.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time and your insights and sharing with us. And again, that's what this is about. What do you believe? I hope everybody watching enjoyed this little session, and that you will consider coming back as we talk to other people. Again, it doesn't matter whether it's political, spiritual, scientific, different viewpoints, cultural. Every person has a perspective. Every perspective can be informative. What do you believe?